I'm Sarah Gold, and I have with me today President and Dean Alicia Ouellette from Albany Law School, my alma mater. And we're going to talk today about practice in the time of COVID-19. So as a dean of a law school, obviously this has impacted you as a professor, as an administrator, and as an individual far more so than individual lawyers have. Can you tell me a little bit about the timeline at the school as far as when things really started kind of going, wonky as far as knowing that things had to change and change immediately?
Yes, so it's been an incredibly challenging time, as you can imagine. And like many schools, we were on spring break when it became increasingly clear that we needed to make some decisions very quickly about whether our students could come back, whether we would go online. So that week of spring break, I was traveling internationally at the time, so I was meeting with my leadership team constantly as we were trying to work through these decisions. What do we do? And we first made the decision that we were going to adopt very strict social distancing policies, which at the time seemed very radical. Albany Law School was going to have a no handshake policy, and everyone had to wash their hands when they walked in, or disinfect their hands when they walked in the door. So we put out our first communication saying that, and 2 days later, we let the community know that we were going to shut down we were going to extend spring break for a week, and then go online for 2 weeks, thinking that was really dramatic. During that week of shutdown, we did a lot of training for faculty. Because most of our faculty had never taught in an online space, we had to, really get them up to speed. And they were great. We have faculty members who have taught the same class in the same classroom at the same time of day for decades, and all of a sudden they were live on Zoom. Some of these faculty members really, it was a stretch, but they embraced it, they leaned into it, and they did an absolutely wonderful job. As we looked at that 2 week we're going to be online period, we then kept assessing every day what's the likelihood of that we can come back to campus. And it was our goal to come back to campus. We do really value our time sitting with each other and talking across the table and being in person. But at some point, and I don't remember the precise moment, but it became very clear that it wasn't going to be safe to be bringing students back from around the country. So we went fully online. So it was a whirlwind. It was not something anyone could ever be prepared for.
Did you have, like you said, you had students from around the country. Did you have a large international presence at all, so they had to go to asynchronous teaching?
We do have some international students, but we not compared to other colleges and universities, particularly at spring break time. International students tend to stay local because traveling, it's only a week, unless it's this year. So most of our faculty went to synchronous classes. So that did mean that some of our students who were in Oregon and California or Texas, if they had an 8 a.m. or a 9 a.m. class, they were getting up very early. We did record all of the classes so that if a student couldn't be there for time zone reasons or for other COVID-related reasons, they could always attend later by watching. we had a couple faculty members, those who had taught in our master's program previously. The master's program is all asynchronous. Some of those faculty chose to go to an asynchronous format. So we did have, we gave our faculty a lot of choices, sort of figure out how to do this the best way you can under these very trying circumstances. So we did have a couple of faculty. There was a con law class that was taught asynchronously. So that was a different approach. And we've learned quite a bit as we moved into the summer, where we continued to stay online. But we announced yesterday that we are planning to return to campus for those people who are ready with a remote option. And we're doing lots of learning about what works best for our classes and for our students and for our faculty. We are much more knowledgeable today than we were in March about online pedagogy and how to do this right, because we've now learned by doing in having jumped in the deep end very suddenly and unexpectedly.
So how does the Socratic method work over distance?
So it works. The challenge, so with a Zoom classroom, you can see your students, you have the list, and faculty did continue, some faculty continued to do use the Socratic method. What we are hearing from our faculty is that the Zoom lag with the unmuting is a little awkward, right? It does pose, it makes that back and forth a little bit challenging. I've heard from, I've talked to hundreds of students now. Some of them had some really, they felt like the faculty were just as present and in their face and scary online through Zoom. And others who felt like it was different. And a lot of our faculty tried lots of things. There was a lot of experimentation that went on, sort of using the breakout room feature of Zoom to do group projects. And here's a hypothetical. We're going to break you in a bunch of little rooms. People can go off and work through the hypothetical, and then we're going to come back and have a conversation. They used the polling features of Zoom. And so there was a lot of interaction. Many of our faculty decided, we heard from students about Zoom fatigue. So there were days that students were in Zoom classes for 6 or 8 hours, and over the course of the week it could be 18 hours of Zoom classes where you're on call, right? So some of our faculty started doing more posting, using some of the asynchronous, the Canvas learning management system to post like voice over PowerPoint lectures, or have some discussion board and try to make the Zoom classes more interactive. So again, we're learning quite a bit as we go forward, and we plan for a fall that we can't really plan for because we don't know exactly what the health situation will be.
And to compound this, the Court of Appeals originally had to approve you guys going online as well as everyone else in New York, because this is not a given that online courses are not necessarily allowed for purposes of teaching at a JD level.
That's right. So New York law schools have a couple of regulators. The Court of Appeals is one because it regulates admission to the bar. We also have the American Bar Association's Council on Legal Education that accredits us. And the Council on Legal Education has limitations on how much online learning is permissible, as does the New York Court of Appeals. So we had to work with both of our regulators in order to get permission to go online and then to continue going forward, getting a variance so that we can continue teaching online as the pandemic requires.
And now that we're past the end of semester, you're now in summer term. You are also teaching a class on COVID-19?
I am. Law in the time of pandemic. So it's part of what we experienced at Albany Law School was many of our students lost their summer opportunities. They had internships or jobs that were supposed to be in person but couldn't be because of the pandemic, and they were canceled or cut way back. And so we really wanted to create opportunities for something meaningful for students to do. So I thought it would be really interesting to try to put together what we sort of call a pop-up class, a very, quickly, and it was very quickly put together class on COVID law. And it's been really fascinating. It's there are so many issues. It's a 1 credit course, so it barely touches. It's sort of the surveys. So we did executive powers, and how are these executive orders legal, and what does it look like when you've got the federal government saying one thing and the state government saying another in localities. Those questions. We did health law questions. We did a session on insurance law and force majeure and contracts and how that's all playing out in sort of the business side of things. We did all the government relief programs and oversight of those. Each of these topics, right, and it goes on and on. Each of these topics could itself be a course. Yeah, I could teach a full 4 credit course on health law in the time of COVID, because the questions around vaccines, the questions around health equity, medical malpractice, what does it look like to be a physician in this kind of climate, all kinds of things. It's fascinating. So it's been fun to teach the students. The students are great. I've been able to bring in a lot of guest speakers and experts in the field, and it's been a nice, for me, it's been really sort of a highlight of my summer to be back in the classroom, even though I'm on Zoom teaching.
So for those students who have graduated, obviously they're in a newly created limbo state as far as the bar exam is concerned. Right now, we're looking at September, October. If all things hold, the law schools are playing a huge role in the administration of that exam. Can you tell us a little bit about, and I realize it's a moving target, so can you tell us a little bit about where you guys are now?
Yes, so the current plan is for the students who are eligible to register for the New York Bar to take it in September 9th and 10th. The Board of Bar Examiners asked that the law schools make their facilities available, and so we are going to be shutting down for those 2 days and going to full remote teaching to allow the students or the graduates to take the bar exam if in fact it's able to go forward. I will tell you that this is one of the most painful things that I've seen students have to deal with. The bar exam is always an incredibly stressful event, and the preparation for the bar exam is incredibly stressful. Adding to that the uncertainty of what it's going to look like, the worries about health concerns. Can they possibly sit and take the bar exam wearing a mask and being physically distant and sitting for 8 hours without infecting one another? The students they're doing their very best, but they are studying with this sort of weight of uncertainty, and is it even going to happen? So the deans of the New York law schools have really been engaged in a pretty robust dialogue with the Court of Appeals and the New York Board of Bar Examiners. I think that we have advocated for our students in a way that we never have as a collective. It's a very diverse group, right? You've got Columbia, you've got Albany Law School, you've got Buffalo, very, very different kinds of schools. But we all agree that given the pandemic, we need some flexibility for students, and it would be nice for them to have some certainty. So the Court of Appeals did grant there's going to be a limited sort of provisional licensure for students who aren't able to take the bar exam, whether it's because they're not planning to or because they are registered and it gets canceled for the September exam. This doesn't help students who have taken the exam before and didn't pass on their first try. They have not been given seats. The retakers have not been given seats at the September exam, and they're not eligible for the limited license. So we have a group of graduates who were ready to pass, ready to do this. Many, you know, it's true for many great lawyers have to do it a second time, and they're not going to be given that opportunity. So that group of students remains in limbo, and then the bulk of the graduates who are going to be taking it for the first time is also in limbo. So this is, you know, it's challenging, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to give the exam. Albany County is in good shape. There's not a lot of virus here, so depending on what happens as we're seeing the changes in the southern part of the country, if we're able to hold off, the students were asking me just yesterday. I had a group of worried grads ask to meet, and they said, we're hearing that it may not happen. And I said, well, all I can tell you is if it could happen tomorrow, we could do it. You know, we could do it at Albany Law School, but who knows? You know, it's changing so quickly.
And obviously, as you mentioned before, you're ratcheting up to bring students back. Have you had any input from your incoming class who are hesitant about even engaging as a 1L at this point, or is everybody kind of, you know, on board and let's go? And
there are definitely some of the incoming class members who will elect to be remote in the fall. We have many more who want to be physically on campus. What's interesting is the comparison of the incoming class versus the returning students. So we released our plan yesterday and said to returning students, if you know you're going to be fully remote, let us know. We have a total of 5 students who plan to be fully remote. Now that could change, right? It will change,
mm-hmm.
But it's very small. I think what I'm hearing from our admissions team is that the incoming students, it's probably more like 20% that really want to be fully remote. And again, I think that this is all it's all new to them, and coming back to campus is not going to look like it did when they left for spring break, right? We're going to be coming back, everyone wearing masks. There's going to be daily health checks. There's lots of layers of screening and being very careful so that we protect the most vulnerable among us and do our best to prevent widespread contagion. And I think, I suspect, and we'll see, you know, the plan we have is a good one. I think it's very careful and very thought out. But it may be that as some students really kind of, whether they're incoming students or returning students, as they kind of grapple with, all right, this is what it's going to look like. Maybe I am better off taking my classes remotely. And of course, our hand may be forced either by Governor Cuomo or just circumstances. If we do have an outbreak, we may end up being fully remote.
And are you compressing the time frame? I know a lot of schools locally are going in early and ending around Thanksgiving. Is that similar for you?
So what we did instead, we had a student advisory council. They were really concerned about compressing law school. That if you make it go too fast, students won't learn, and it just will be overwhelming and stressful and hard to do your clinics and all that. So what we're doing, we are starting as planned and ending as planned. What we're not doing is bringing students back after Thanksgiving break, because when they scatter about the country, bringing them back will cause risks that we think are too high. So any classes, we have 1 week of classes before exams after Thanksgiving. That week will be remote, and exams will be administered remotely. So that's how we're handling it. It's a little different from the schools that did compress, but we tried to be responsive to the student concerns.
Online exams for law students is a little different than undergrad. I know that from personal experience, trying to do an online exam and saying you're on your honor not to look stuff up. Doesn't exactly work. There's a lot more open book, obviously, in law school, so it's not that big of a deal.
And that was that when we did exams for this spring, it was they were all open book, open notes, which was a challenge. You know, that's a change. We did continue with timed exams. So if the exam was meant to be 3 hours or 4 hours, the students were given, they had to complete it within 4 hours, but they had a 24-hour block. So what we learned is, you know, our students did not necessarily have great places to be studying or taking exams. We had students who were doing law school literally out of broom closets. We had one guy who took his exam out of a car because the home situation was such that there was no quiet. And so by giving them a 24-hour block to take, say, a 3-hour exam, if for our students who are parents, they could take the exam early in the morning before their children woke up. And they could, you know, so they could do it at 2 o'clock in the morning, or they could do it at 10 o'clock at night, and just try to find the best block of time. We haven't made those decisions yet about how to administer exams in December. I know our students would like the answers right now. We're exploring the possibility of proctored exams so that we could have closed book exams. There's in some cases that makes sense. So we'll see. I mean, this is everything's evolving and changing.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I say, having been a little bit on the academic side of it myself this spring, I know what a challenge it was for me, and I consider myself to be technically savvy. To be handling all of this plus the administration, it's beyond the ken. Like no one asked for this, no one expected this.
No one trained us to be public health experts and about toilet flumes and all.
Exactly.
That we have had to learn about, and for you as a professor, having to suddenly like shift mid-term, you know how challenging it was, and for your students too.
Right, and I say to even layer on the administration and the finances that go along with this, I don't even know what to tell you. You know, it's just I can't imagine. And you know, good on you for being able to keep on keeping on.
We're doing the best we can. The finance stuff is really challenging. I mean, it's, you know, there are huge expenses to getting ready to return to campus and to try to do this, and investing in technology and buying COVID tests and all, you know, PPE and you know, changing your filtration systems to make sure that the air is of sound quality, and the investment in technology is just massive because, at least for the foreseeable future, right, our students, if we are going to be in person, we have to make it really easy for anyone who's symptomatic or has been exposed to self-quarantine. So that means they have to be able to sort of be in the classroom, that they stay home and attend class remotely. So we had to really invest in some pretty significant technology upgrades to make all of our classes kind of Zoom ready, so that folks can attend remotely and in person. And it forced us to do something that we had been thinking about to become the law school of the future. We just sort of had to do it over the summer, like make it happen. So.
And I'm hoping for your sake you haven't had to go as far as to furlough professors yet.
No, we have been really committed to our people, and so our staff and our faculty have been busy and working, and we are going to do everything we can to keep our people. We've got a great team, and it's a fairly lean operation. There's no one that is doing nothing. So we've been lucky that we've been able to keep everyone very busy. I think people are working harder than ever. And no, we have not been in that position.
Glad to hear it. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to address that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I mean, this is just, as you know, this is the most challenging time I think schools face. I think if the pandemic continues and we're not able to resume sort of life as usual, we really have some hard decisions to make, right? We really our hand is being forced in sort of in terms of really embracing online education and online exams. And I think that law schools are going to have to really reinvent themselves as we go forward. So it's interesting times to come, for sure.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.